أهلا بكم مشاهدينا الكرام إلى هذه الحلقة الجديدة من مستقبل الطاقة. هذه عناويننا: 10 أيام من التفاوض حول اتفاقية البلاستيك تنتهي بالفشل وسط انقسام عالمي بين تقييد الإنتاج والتركيز على إعادة التدوير. من النفايات إلى القيمة، سابك تطلق أحد أكثر المشاريع تقدماً في إعادة تدوير البلاستيك. أهلا بكم. فشل المجتمعون في مؤتمر للأمم المتحدة قبل أسبوعين في جينيف بالتوصل إلى إجماع حول اتفاقية عالمية ملزمة لمعالجة التلوث البلاستيكي. الاجتماعات في جينيف التي استمرت ل10 أيام متواصلة والتي شكلت الجولة السادسة من هذه المفاوضات الدولية خرجت من دون اتفاق، وتأتي استكمالاً لاجتماعات كوريا الجنوبية نهاية العام الماضي والتي لاقت نفس المصير في حينها. فقد أشار عدد من أعضاء وفود الدول التي كانت تدفع باتجاه اتفاق وصفوه بأكثر طموحاً بأن المسودة النهائية للاتفاق التي عرضت في اليوم الأخير لم ترقى لتطلعاتهم، وآثروا عدم الاتفاق بدلاً من الإعلان عن اتفاقية سيئة على حد تعبيرهم، حيث رفعت الجلسة من دون حتى الإعلان عن موعد جديد لاستئناف المفاوضات. فقد بات واضحاً الخط الفاصل بين مجموعتين من الدول. الأولى تريد اتفاقاً يضع سقفاً لكمية البلاستيك الجديد المنتج عالمياً ولأنواع معينة من الكيماويات السامة التي تدخل في إنتاجه. أما المجموعة الثانية فتريد اتفاقاً يحسن من عملية جمع النفايات البلاستيكية ويعزز من إعادة التدوير. هذا الانقسام هو نفسه الذي عطل جولات المباحثات السابقة، وكان لافتاً موقف وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية التي مثلت الوفد الأمريكي في المفاوضات، حيث أعلنت منذ بداية الجولة الأخيرة بأنها تدعم التوصل إلى اتفاق يحترم السيادة الوطنية ويركز على خفض التلوث البلاستيكي من دون أن يضع عوائق صعبة على المنتجين. ويشير المختصون بأن ما يقوض استخدام كبرى الشركات الاستهلاكية للبلاستيك المعاد تدويره هو ندرة وجوده. فبالرغم من أن بعض بقاع العالم تسبح بالنفايات البلاستيكية، إلا أن هناك شح في القدرة على تجميع وفرز تلك النفايات من أجل إعادة تدويرها. الجدير بالذكر بأن إنتاج العالم من البلاستيك يواصل نموه المضطرد، فبحسب تقرير صادر عن منظمة الOECD العام الماضي فإن الإنتاج العالمي تضاعف بين عامي 2000 و2019 من 234 مليون إلى 460 مليون طن سنوياً. وبحسب الأوضاع الراهنة يمكن لهذا الإنتاج أن يصل في عام 2040 إلى 736 مليون طن. وتشكل انبعاثات الغازات الدفيئة من إنتاج البلاستيك نحو 3.4% من الإجمالي العالمي بحسب إحدى الدراسات، وهي نسبة أعلى من نسبة ما ينتجه قطاع الطيران العالمي. وبحسب دراسة حديثة أخرى فإن هذه النسبة قد تصل حتى إلى 5.3% من إجمالي الانبعاثات العالمية. وبغض النظر عن الصيغة النهائية لأي اتفاق محتمل، فمن الواضح أن مصير هذه المحادثات الدولية بات غير واضح، ويبقى على المحك قدرة عالمنا على التعامل مع ملف التلوث البلاستيكي. حول المفاوضات بشأن اتفاقية البلاستيك قابلت ستوارت هاريس المتحدث باسم المجلس الدولي لجمعية الكيميائيات ICCA، وسألته عما تم إحرازه من تقدم في جولة المفاوضات الأخيرة وأهم النقاط العالقة.
It is important to note that governments did make significant progress at INC 5.2 on critical areas like product design, which of course is an important element to addressing the broader issue of plastic pollution. But as you mentioned, the sticking points did remain. Financing continues to be a challenging topic, not surprising, because financing often is a difficult discussion in any multilateral environmental agreement negotiation. Also challenging were views on scope. Governments continue to struggle with the scope of the agreement. Should it just focus on addressing plastic pollution, or should it look at the full life cycle of plastics, including production and chemicals used in plastics? Also, plastic products, whether or not the agreement should include lists or whether it should simply provide guidance and criteria to governments to support national actions to address the leakage of plastic waste and plastic pollution into the environment.
Stuart, as industry is not at the negotiating table but participates as an observer, how effective do you feel your role has been in shaping the discussion as an industry? And what input are you prioritizing, or did you prioritize in Geneva?
So as an observer to the process, we play a very important role. Our view and our role is to be there in the meeting. We aren't allowed to participate in all of the negotiating sessions. Some are closed to governments only. But where we are able to participate, and certainly in the side meetings that we have with governments, we're able to listen and hear what governments are saying and what their concerns are. And that enables us as an industry to be more effective as a solutions provider as we bring ideas to the table. One of those key solutions or one of those ideas that we brought to the table is the creation of a database of chemical additives used in plastics. So that's something that we heard early in the negotiations, all the way back at INC2, calls from governments not really understanding how chemical additives are used in plastics, or even generally the life cycle of how, or the supply chain of how plastics move from the creation of resin or the material itself to products, to how those products are used. And so we do play a critically important role in supporting governments and providing that information on how supply chains work, how the industry works, but then, of course, bringing solutions to the table to help governments as they work to craft this global agreement.
Okay, speaking of solutions, many countries in what's called the High Ambition Coalition wanted to cap or phase down plastic production. But industry opposes those proposed caps. Why does the sector see caps as the wrong approach, and what alternative do you propose?
We do see capping or restricting production as the wrong approach. We need to focus, and we encourage governments to focus on addressing the issue of plastic leaking into the environment. When we look at the broader macroeconomic trends, and we see a growing demand for plastic as a material across many different applications. And one of the things that we've been able to do in working with governments is help better explain the use of plastics across the various sectors of the economy. Plastics touch nearly every aspect of our economy, from packaging of food to lightweighting of vehicles, to use in aerospace and aircraft applications, to communications and electronics and so on. So we see plastics used across all these different applications. We also commissioned a study with Oxford Economics to look at what would the impact of reducing the supply of plastic as a material into the economy mean. And what Oxford Economics found in their study was that it would impact those least able to afford it across all countries. So regardless of high or low income countries, the segment of the population, the citizens least able to afford those increases, that increased cost, would be the ones that would bear the majority of the impact of reducing plastic into the system. As an alternative, we believe that circularity provides a much more effective and targeted solution to address plastic pollution or plastic waste leaking into the environment. Circularity is far more than recycling. It starts with the design, how products are made, how they're used, and then how they are captured, how that value is captured at the end of life. And so that really, we believe, is a much more focused and targeted solution that will be effective in addressing plastic pollution and will also have the least amount of unintended consequences on consumers.
Stuart, let's circle back on additives in plastics. Some countries want a global framework to regulate toxic additives in plastics. Why is the industry opposed to this being part of the treaty? And how do you justify relying on existing frameworks like REACH or TSCA instead?
So as you mentioned, there are existing frameworks at the national level. There are also some international agreements that do address chemicals. It's important to note that chemical additives are chemicals that are used in plastics to provide specific properties to meet the performance of an application, but those chemicals are also used in other applications. And so it's important for governments to take a comprehensive approach to chemicals management, and that's what we advocate for as the industry. And so whether it's something like the Global Framework on Chemicals, which is a voluntary initiative, but it's a voluntary initiative that provides governments with the resources to develop national chemical management systems. You mentioned REACH. In the United States, we have TSCA, the Toxic Substances Control Act. Other countries have similar national chemical management systems. These systems are critical to helping address in a comprehensive way the use of chemicals in across various applications, and really taking more of a risk-based approach to ensure that we're balancing the various impacts and the applications of chemicals used across our economy.
نتوقف الآن مع فاصل قصير نتابع بعده في مستقبل الطاقة. الابتكار في تصميم المنتجات البلاستيكية مرحلة مهمة في تعزيز دائرية المنتج النهائي. أهلا بكم من جديد. يطرح ملف تلوث البلاستيك إشكالية أكبر حول تمويل البنية التحتية اللازمة لإدارة النفايات البلاستيكية، فهناك ما يقرب من 2,700,000,000 إنسان حول العالم يفتقرون إلى أنظمة فعالة لجمع النفايات ومعالجتها، وهو ما يتطلب استثمارات تقدر بتريليونات الدولارات عالميا. ولمواجهة هذا التحدي تنادي صناعة البلاستيك بمقاربة تجمع بين الحكومات والقطاع الخاص عبر شراكات تحفز الاستثمار في إعادة التدوير والتجميع والفرز، وترفض تغليب منطق فرض الضرائب والرسوم العالمية على البلاستيك. حول هذه الإشكالية طرحت على ضيفي ستوارت هاريس المتحدث باسم المجلس الدولي لجمعيات الكيميائيات ICCA، طرحت عليه السؤال التالي: من يجب أن يمول البنية التحتية الضخمة اللازمة لجمع وإعادة تدوير البلاستيك؟ الحكومات أم المستهلكون أم صناعة البلاستيك نفسها؟ لنستمع إلى إجابته.
There is a tremendous need for financing to address this challenge, in the range of trillions of dollars. And so traditional financing mechanisms that we see in multilateral environmental agreements are not going to be sufficient to address the problem. And that's where governments contribute to a fund, and then other governments get money from that fund to help implement the agreement. We really see the need for an innovative approach that looks at things like public-private partnerships and how do you attract investment from the private sector. We do not support global taxes or fees on resin or on the plastic industry, but rather we support governments utilizing policies to incentivize investment in things like collection or in mechanical or advanced recycling operations or in sortation. And we've seen this work in many settings, in many different countries, at a much smaller scale. And we think the plastic pollution agreement negotiations are a real opportunity to massively scale this new innovative approach to public-private partnerships to get investors off the sidelines and really engaged in a more circular economy. But that's going to require changes to national regulations. It's going to require various incentives for private sector investment, but it's also going to require engagement of consumers in terms of the use of things like recycled content, various systems like extended producer responsibility or similar schemes that help to incentivize and capture the value of plastic at the end of life so it can be pulled back into the system, really going back to that design phase where plastic products and packaging are made and put into the economy.
The ICCA cites that there are more than 160 recycling projects backed by the industry. What new technologies are proving most promising, and what are the challenges in scaling those globally?
So there really isn't a one-size-fits-all or a silver bullet approach to recycling technologies. What we're finding is that all of the above mix of different recycling technologies is critical. So whether it's traditional mechanical recycling, which of course has seen many advancements over the years with artificial intelligence and robotics and advanced sorting, or whether it's advanced or chemical recycling, which actually, if you will, unbakes the cake of a plastic product and takes it all the way back to its component parts so that then new plastic material can be made from that and used in a similar way that virgin plastic can be used. All of these technologies are important to be available to governments as they are looking to scale circularity. And so rather than a single technology, really the promise that we see is the advancement across the range of recycling technologies, and importantly, across the range and the innovation that we see in product design. Designing products to be more easily recycled, designing products to utilize recycled plastic in the various applications. It's a pretty exciting time across that whole range of technologies.
On the point of design, how's the industry rethinking, Stuart, the product and packaging design to make plastics more reusable and recyclable? And more importantly, how soon will consumers see tangible changes in that regard, do you think?
Well, this is an incredibly exciting area. And we see all the way from the material producers to those companies that are actually making products, investment in design and in innovation. And so whether it's taking that multi-layer, multi-material package, something as simple as a toothpaste tube, which used to have aluminum and various other materials in it to protect the toothpaste, we're now seeing design changes where that's now made of a single type of plastic, although put together in an innovative way to still provide the performance that's needed. And so customers are already seeing some of those types of things. We're also seeing innovations in things like reuse and refill. So whether it's detergents, whether it's cleaning products, whether it's cosmetics, we're seeing companies trial and find success with various business models that are encouraging reuse and refill. So consumers are already starting to see this. We feel there's an opportunity with the plastic pollution agreement to accelerate those innovations, really provide additional support to industry and to those companies that are pushing and really innovating at the edge to continue to go further so that we can, again, capture that material, capture the value from that material at the end of life, and bring it back into the system through innovations in design.
Stuart, so finally, what are your expectations on a potential treaty in the near future? In what direction will the UN negotiations go, and when do you expect it to resume?
So that's a great question for governments. Obviously, this is a government-driven process. INC 5.2 was closed with very little clarity on the next step. Our expectation is that governments will reconvene at some point to continue the negotiations, but it's really not clear to us at this point. And so we are continuing to engage with governments. We're continuing to engage with the UN Environment Program to understand what the next step is, because we do see an important role as a solutions provider as governments continue these negotiations. And we are committed to supporting governments in their effort to craft a legally binding agreement to address plastic pollution that really has circularity at its core. to solve this global challenge.
في هذا السياق وضمن جهود أكبر شركة بتروكيماوية سعودية سابك في خلق اقتصاد دائري للبلاستيك، تم إنتاج قبل أيام أول دفعة من مشروعها المشترك في مدينة جيلين في هولندا مع شركة بلاستيك أنرجي من زيت التحلل الحراري الناتج عن إعادة تدوير البلاستيك المستخدم الذي يصعب عادة إعادة تدويره. هذه المادة التي تم تسميتها بتاكويل مصنوعة من إعادة تدوير النفايات البلاستيكية صعبة التدوير والتي كانت ستذهب إلى المطامر أو التي كان سيتم حرقها، حيث يتم استغلال هذه المادة المنتجة كبديل عن النافتا كلقيم في صناعة البتروكيماويات في منتجات مثل مغلفات المواد الغذائية والبلاستيك المستخدم في الأدوات الطبية. وعند وصول المشروع إلى طاقته التشغيلية القصوى سيستطيع إعادة تدوير ما يصل إلى 20,000 طن من النفايات البلاستيكية سنوياً. ومع هذا الخبر مشاهدينا نصل إلى ختام هذه الحلقة من مستقبل الطاقة. دائما تابعونا على منصة أكس تحت وسم مستقبل الطاقة، وأيضا على قناتنا على اليوتيوب وموقعنا على الإنترنت. نلتقي الأسبوع المقبل، إلى اللقاء.